Ladies and gentlemen, we got a fun one today. Now, you all know that I care a lot about your security, your internet security, your cyber security, ladies and gentlemen, because we live in a spooky world nowadays where everyone's out to get your data. Now, that being said, I am a practical computer user. I know that I live in the modern world of smartphones, of 5G, of my brain frying out. I get it, I understand. But I'm all for data privacy. But you gotta be practical. Will your data be spied on at some point? For sure. But protecting yourself 95% of the way is better than zero. And there's a lot of ways you can protect yourself when the government even has taps on your on your property too. You can enable you can learn to encrypt on your own. You can learn to use operating systems that don't belong to a specific company. Quick example, I use Linux for 95% of my shit. For the 5% of my usage on my computer where I play Rainbow Six Siege, I load up a Windows 10 virtual machine. That way, Microsoft only needs to know that, wow, Amuda plays Rainbow Six Siege, and then he shuts off his computer. What does he do the next day? Oh, he does the exact same thing. God, it's like he's virtualizing his computer. And I do the same for Mac. So Apple's like, all Amuda does is open up editing software. And it's all he does day in and day out. They won't know anymore. But you know what? That's just a short example. Now, if you've been quarantined like the rest of the world, a lot of you may have lost your jobs, and for that I grossly apologize, and I hope that the entertainment is keeping you by through that obvious depression spike. That being said, though, there are people that still have jobs. For instance, I work in a tech field, so for me, computing is just the nature, the norm, and going home and isolating yourself and working is a doable thing. If you're at school right now, you're probably like, man, I can have my class online? Hell yes! So in those cases, a lot of you probably are using applications like Zoom, video conferencing, so you can have your social gatherings with all the distancing you could want. Now, it's at this point where the usage for Zoom has spiked like 600%. So of course, it's under some scrutiny by cybersecurity experts. Because as you all know, we're living in a world where even in COVID-19, governments are still trying to pass shit like the Earn It Act, which is spying and it's bad. And that being said, it's a whole different tangent. I'll get into that in another follow-up video if I have to. But if you've been following the Zoom client, you'll notice that day by day they have various security problems. And we'll cover them piece by piece. First piece of business that came out was iPhone users using Zoom. We're no longer sending your data to Facebook. Turns out they had a Facebook Analytics API tossed into the situation. Or actually, I believe it was the Graph Application Programming Interface as they want to toss it in. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in my knowledge, there's always a privacy policy with applications. They actually failed to notify users what they were even doing. So for some reason, your data was being sent to Facebook without you being notified. What type of data? Fuck, I don't know. But that's just one of the hits to the nuts that we're looking at here. University of Toronto Citizen Lab at some point found out that the encryption standards weren't up to snuff. And for some reason, Zoom was in fact connecting us to Chinese servers despite us not being in China. Now they had a clever method where they were telling us, well, because of geofencing and keeping you into the most closest server in your region, which is how most of the applications work. Let's say you live in Sweden. They're going to find the closest data center for you in Sweden, so it just makes your situation a whole lot of a heck easier when you're connecting. Kill your latency as much as they can. But they said Zoom rapidly added capacity to our Chinese region to handle a massive increase in demand. Of course, COVID-19, we mistakenly added our 2 Chinese data centers to a lengthy whitelist of backup bridges, potentially enabling non-Chinese clients to, under extremely limited, connect them to Chinese servers. Now, we're going to get into surveillance in a bit, but mistakenly they added the Chinese data farms as backups to when the other data farms were getting added. This I can chalk up to, hey, sometimes they want to just under the cover, have a bunch of backup solutions. I'm actually okay with that, but at the same time, we'll get to another shady deal. Now, if you're a Mac user, and God forbid, I feel kind of bad for you, here's a Mac researcher, Felix, who works at VMware. That is actually a cybersecurity firm focused on Mac OS. Now, Mac OS, for all of the shit that I give it, is a pretty decent operating system. Look, I don't like Apple's hardware, but their operating system is okay, if albeit very Fisher pricey. That being said, though, he found out that in their installer, the Zoom Mac OS installer, There is actual code where it abuses pre-installation scripts. It actually launches an embedded 7-zip file, and even then, it basically fakes a system prompt. That is shady behavior. In fact, it's so shady that that's the same behavior exhibited by actual Mac OS malware. Now, it's so bad that Eric Yuan, yes, the CEO of Zoom, responded. Let's read this. Thank you for your feedback. We implemented to balance the number of clicks given the limitations of the standard technology. To join a meeting from a Mac is not easy. Bro, everything on a Mac is dog shit easy. That's a bullshit point. This is why this method is used by Zoom and others. Your point is well taken, and we will continue to improve. Hold up. Hold up. Those Fisher-Price clicks on a Mac OS, they're actually used to remind people, hey, the application you're installing could be used for some nefarious purposes. It's basically there as a check and balance. And look, I add hyperbole to these things, but it's really not that bad. Faking system prompts is not the way to go. Zoom, that is not what you want to be doing. If it takes away the complete credibility of the system you're on. Now, it's to the point where I'm going to get to the real meat and potatoes of the situation. Now, if you look at the actual hits that's being done by Zoom all the time, somehow some of these hits can be Beijing, Guanghuan, Xinjiang Digital. I hope I pronounced that right, by the way. So yes, we are in fact hitting their Beijing data centers, and we're also hitting Shenzhen Tencent beta data centers as well. Now, of course, you might wonder, well, Muda, that must be standard, and for the most part, it actually can be. But the problem is when we look at the next thing past this. Now, Zoom actually claimed that, hey, we have end-to-end encryption. Now, let me tell you a bit about end-to-end. You know when we talked about the EARN Act, I gave you an explanation. Let me just put it real blatantly for you. End-to-end encryption is basically if you had two devices, right? You had phone A, and like fucking, I don't know, assume this is a cell phone too, right? Like this is just an SSD enclosure. But phone A, phone B. Phone A has its own set of keys, phone B has its own set of keys. What happens is when these two are communicating over the internet, they send a message like, hey, phone B, how are you? Phone B gets the message. Because these two have keys, this encrypts data, this will decrypt the data. And if a hacker is sitting in between, you know, oh shit, they're talking about each other, I can dig out those packets, sure. But because those keys are not available to me, they're only available to this guy and this guy locally on their devices, I'm not going to be able to see anything unless I sit through cracking. Now, don't let me bring you up how dumb the math is going to be to crack through a bunch of this highly encrypted material. You know, if we're using the same stuff that the military is using to an extent, don't get me wrong, some people do, it's going to be pretty damn difficult, and you'd have to be pretty important for somebody to put that amount of money, time, and resources towards you. But that's the thing with end-to-end encryption. It's literally designed for two people and no one else to see. See, what Zoom did is they decided to connect you to their servers using HTTPS, TLS, whatever they're going to call it, which is fine and dandy. See, that will protect you from a hacker on a Wi-Fi network to look at your packets. That's fine. The problem is, once you connect to Zoom servers to have a conference meeting, it's not end-to-end. Meaning, right here I'll show you, Zoom currently maintains the key management system for these systems in the cloud. Importantly, Zoom has implemented robust and validated internal controls to prevent unauthorized access to any content that users share during meetings. Not limited to video, audio, chat content of those meetings. Okay. By default, all participants' audio and video in a Zoom meeting appears to be encrypted and decrypted with a single AES 128 key cipher shared amongst the participants. So you're all sharing it. The key is generated and distributed to the meeting's participants by Zoom servers, right? So, that being said, look further. We observed keys for encrypting and decrypting messages transmitted to servers in Beijing, China. That is University of Toronto's Citizen Lab. Now, here's the problem with that. This is where two people can be tossed in. If a hacker gets access to these keys, congratulations, your entire meeting is brought up to them. They can look through and peek all they want if they get those keys, which for a hacker getting those keys, if they're good enough, is not the hardest thing in the world. But here's the scariest thing, governments getting access to it. Now, let me talk to you about this, okay? I love China, and I love the people of China. I don't like the government of China. Now, let's talk about surveillance. Now, I say that the Chinese definitely have backdoors in their tech companies. You know what? Every big country does. If you think because you live in the United States, or you live in Canada, the UK, Australia, you're just as watched as the people in China. That's a fact, all right? All this surveillance technology exists. It's done at a mass scale. But here's the key difference. In China, there is no legal recourse for a company. If someone walked to Tencent offices in China and said, hey, we want a list of everyone you've been talking, we want this specific data set and we want it now. Tencent can't go to Chinese courts and say, nope, we're going to fight it. No, you're shut down or you're giving them the data. It's a communist regime, boys and girls. It's how it works. See, in America, Canada, Australia, if Apple gets sanctioned by the FBI to open something, they can make a case based on the constitutions and laws of that country to fight against it. There's a legal difference. Is there still surveillance? Yes. But is there a level of security because of the inherent legal framework in one country versus the other? Absolutely. Now, I'm not going to say that the Chinese government is completely complicit in hacking everything, but time and time has proven again that they definitely backdoor the hell out of their people. You're talking about a country that has a fucking social credit system. Now, with the world using this application, Zoom, which obviously has connections to China, and you can tell by their various SEC filings. Here's something from their SEC Gov archives. This is US. This is completely available for any of you to read right now. This is where they write, we currently serve our users from 13 co-located data centers in Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, Germany, India, Japan, and the Netherlands, and the United States. They use Amazon services and Microsoft's cloud services. So they use 2 US centers, but they also have their own. This is actually a company that has most of the development done in China. Whether that's to save cost on development or to have their base server farm there is a whole different story. Now, over here is actually an interesting take too. You can look at the list of subsidiaries that Zoom works with or owns. For one, they have Zoom Voice Communications Incorporation, which is headquartered in the US. Then you have these various companies that basically are FOB, forward operating bases. So you've got a UK, Australia, Netherlands, Japan, France, India, and Canadian office. But then you've got something called Zoom Video Communications, Suzu, SASB Inc., SASB Software, Zoom Video Communications in Hong Kong, and then Shanghai. So now you've got these various services. Of course, looking at this, you can somehow gauge where the actual base of operations is. So the fact that we're getting packets sent to Beijing, our keys are there, shows me that Beijing is more than just a backup server. It's definitely one of the home-based servers that we're using to communicate with our friends. Now, going back to the Chinese surveillance idea that I'm bringing up, listen, this is a country that can get away with that. Now, do you trust an application that is headquartered in a country where such gross violations of surveillance occur overtly? This is the big reality. There's no legal recourse for Zoom to fight with the CCP over data collection. This is a fact. This is how the government of China operates. See, if being a US company, their US servers, they can at least put up a fight with US Supreme Court's US justices until a certain point, for sure. But here they can put up a fight. In China, there is no fight to be put up. Now, what have we learned today, ladies and gentlemen? Well, we've learned today that there's a service called Zoom, which a lot of people are using, but it now has a very, very long list of shady elements, shady cybersecurity practices, whether it be in how they develop applications, how they deploy applications, or how they overall run their back-end servers. That being said, I know that Zoom is a part of the COVID-19 world we're living. And that's why I'm going to tell you, going forward, what are some of the solutions? Well, for one, you can choose to virtualize the hell out of Zoom. Whenever I use a software from an agency that I know could be involved in spying, I almost always get something like VMware or VirtualBox, many of these virtualization softwares where I can create my own version of Windows running on it and contain Zoom. If you want to use Zoom in a virtual machine, because at least at that point you can limit its network stack, you can limit the amount of control it could have on your hardware. And if, for instance, this app may be used for spying, maybe it's running in the background, if you need to use Zoom, fire up a virtual machine, use Zoom, and then turn it off. It's how I played Siege earlier. Like I said, I only fired up Windows 10 to play a video game. Then I turned it off. No fear of spying. I could go back to my open source Linux operating system and never worry about spying on that front. Could there be a backdoor on my Linux installation? For sure, but because of its open source nature, there are various programmers and researchers who are able to figure out these endpoints, these vulnerabilities, and patch them up pretty quickly, versus your closed source system, which may have a 0 day for God knows how long. That being said, though, there are various other open source applications you can use. I would never trust Zoom after everything that I've looked at. Given all of their cybersecurity practices and given how they operate here, I would not trust this program. I would highly recommend you use anything else. It doesn't have to be a US program or anything. I'm not trying to make this out to be like, oh, the government of China is spying. Use something that's mostly open source. Use something that everybody can vet, including Chinese developers, including American developers, Canadian developers, Indian developers, people in general who can vet these programs. There's many alternatives out there. You just have to find the one that suits you the best. And if you have to use these closed source systems, then please look into virtual machines. They will make your life a hell of a lot easier, and it's the best defense you have. Like I said earlier, I live in a practical world. I know that some of my data will always be given up. But 95% of my privacy being safe is better than 0%. And that's all I'm going to say. So can I say conclusively, is Zoom spying? Or is it the weakest application? I think in terms of cybersec, it is definitely weak. They might be patching it for sure. But given all the Zoom stuff I've seen, the Zoom bombing and all that crap, I do not trust the security of this application. That being said, though, their spying claims, it's definitely shady and there's a lot of red flags. But is it conclusive? Hell no. Which is why I give this the virtual machine rating. Virtualize it, close your virtual machine after you're done using it, and call it a day. That is all it is. And if you can, find an open source alternative. I don't trust Zoom, and I do not believe that you should trust Zoom either. That being said, this is me, Mudahar, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.